Howdy, folks. Happy Friday. It's actually dry in Buffalo after he got soaked the last couple days. We have Kevin Allen with us, but Russ will start us off with the pre-show. Go ahead, Russ.
Yeah, with sports starting up, an interesting thing a dilemma has come across the at least my desk, and it started on. I thought about this about a month ago, and then I heard about it on Philly radio as well, and I'm sure other places. So I'll bring it to you guys. I've gone to 32 consecutive Mets opening days. Now, opening day will be next Friday. Mm-hmm. And I tweeted out and said, hey, am I missing an opening day here? Does it count? And so far, like 59% said no. Like, I feel so conflicted, even though I know it's for the best not being there. I heard on Philly radio, like there was an Eagles fan that had been to 59 consecutive openers. And so, how do you guys feel? Kevin, you probably have a streak going with the Lions.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I think it doesn't count. Like if you're unable to not allowed in, then I guess you just phrase it that way. Yeah. I've gone to 20 some season openers that fans were at, or that either fans or reporters were allowed to attend. But there's a lot of streaks on the line. To say the least. The other thing about those, a lot of people bought tickets like the opening day. I know I did for the Tigers. I was just going to go as a fan, and I've not received any information about those tickets because I'm not a season ticket holder for the Tigers or anything like that, and like nobody has said, "Hey, we've got your money." Now I haven't pursued it either. But, I've not seen anything about it or anything.
I can tell you why. Unless you were on the MLB app, you were supposed to get an email from the team, but maybe teams were only using it through the app, so they didn't do it. The Phillies were good. The Phillies had sent something to me because I had like 3 or 4 games bought. But the problem was the first go-round, it was impossible to get that money back. Now, after more games got canceled, the Phillies resent that thing around, and I was able to opt out. But yeah, if that's the case around the league, which I guess it probably is. It depends on the organization. And Kev, I guess the Tigers need your money more than you do.
I wonder if they're just counting us forgetting that we had tickets.
Well, I am on the MLB app, and as Russ knows, and we talked about this, I have the MLB at bat radio package, so I can listen to John Sterling for those many Yankee afternoon games, which I can't get on the local radio. They charge you $19.99 a year, and it rolls over, and every year you get charged just before the beginning of the season. Well, they charge me the $19.99 after they shut down things, and I'm not getting the promised 162 games. I'm getting 60, so I should be getting a refund of like $9.99, and I have yet to get it. So I think they're holding my money hostage, just like they're holding yours hostage, Kev.
Yeah. I think, and I'm willing to bet we're not the only 2 people in America.
No. You know what the other conundrum is, Kev? Now, I didn't know that people still hadn't gotten money refunded, but just imagine they started advertising, hey, buy your tickets for 2021. I want to know one person in the world that has the confidence in Major League Baseball right now to start buying up tickets for 2021, because I don't.
Yeah. I mean, I'd be willing to bet that it'll be into next season before we have fans. Like, I'm not so sure we'll have them at the start of certainly we won't have them for the NHL. We're not going to have fans in December. At least I don't think so.
Well, I told Russ this last night, and I couldn't believe that, because MLB, at least you can say with hockey and to a lesser extent with the NBA, there's a certainty regarding, there's the bubble for the NBA and there are the hub cities for the NHL. I'm listening to a radio show out of New York yesterday, and the report came out that the Washington Nationals, this is a week before the beginning of the season, they don't know whether they're going to be able to play games in Nationals Park in D.C. And they're looking at alternate locations in Fredericksburg, Virginia.
There was an update with that, though, Mike. Ken Rosenthal said they did get approval in D.C. to play.
Okay.
That was, I think it was earlier this morning.
Okay. I missed that. I missed that, but that was along the lines, and a lot of people in Buffalo are excited about this. That's along the lines of what's going on with the Blue Jays, because there still hasn't been any change in terms of the Blue Jays being able to play. They can play at Rogers Center, but the teams that come in right now, they don't have a waiver like NHL teams did for the 14-day quarantine. So how can they play teams if they're not allowed to?
Right. Is there going to be a season without the Blue Jays? Because I thought about that.
No.
Like, I thought no. I mean, are they going to let them cross the border and play somewhere else?
No, that's what I'm saying. Buffalo, they would play.
No, will they? Are they allowed to do it though?
They're allowed to come to the U.S. without a 14-day quarantine. Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they better get to it, because otherwise, opening day is next week. Like, I don't know when their opening day would be, but they better make some arrangements quick if they want to actually have home games.
Right. I mean, it's chaotic. It's potentially chaotic. So
yeah, and the NFL is chaotic too. It seems to be getting worse by the day, because now they're not even talking, and players are starting to voice their displeasure just about player safety. Like, and that, what's funny is about the NFL, and we talked about it a little yesterday, but Kev, we'll get your opinion. Football players seem to be of most of the sports. Football and hockey seem to put their bodies on the line the most. They're trained the most to just ignore almost all health considerations to play. But this time, it's not exactly the case. And football players have, they can go until August 1st to opt out. And right now, like, rookies were supposed to report this weekend. They're not. And there is no plan in place. Like, what do you think is going to happen with the NFL? Do you think they'll have a fair amount of opt-out players?
I do, for sure. I mean, there's no sport that, the environment makes it so dangerous for the participants. Like, in addition to everything else, the contact, the number of people who are in each dressing room, you also add in the added element of cuts and abrasions.
Right.
You have that more than in any other sport. And, geez, man, I just can't even fathom that they're going to be able to get through an NFL season. But, I guess we just don't know enough about the virus and how it behaves to know for sure. But it sure seems that's the most dangerous sport, in my opinion.
Yeah, and we have been joined by ex-chair, as you can see.
Yeah, I can see that. That reminds me of, remember during the last lockout that the podium had its own Twitter feed.
Yes,
I do remember
podium.
that.
Yes.
Podium.
And the podium was quite hilarious.
I liked it. I did. Yeah. I missed the podium, actually.
I thought he was fairly wooden.
Sorry, guys.
I missed the podium more than
I thought he was composite.
Russ, did you want to mention something?
You're talking about me?
No, your chair.
I did say I missed the podium more than you, but otherwise, no.
Russ, did you want to mention something about Tiger Woods?
Yeah, well, I'll mention this. I know there's a lot of Tiger Woods fans out there, and I had this thing with my dad. My dad loves watching golf, and I told my dad 5 years ago that Tiger Woods would never break Jack Nicklaus's record, and maybe it was even longer than that now. And he goes, "Why? Why would you say that?" I said, "Because I just listened to an interview with Jack Nicklaus, and he talked about it was actually like 10 years ago. Jack talked about all the things that happened to him in his life that made it very difficult to win all those games, meaning having kids, being married, all those kinds of things." And I said, "Dad, I just think with Tiger Woods," and this is before he started to break down physically, that he's going to have a hard time with a lot of things. I don't think he's going to do it." And my dad and I, we didn't make a monetary bet, but my dad wasn't with me on that. And I think we're at the point now with Tiger Woods where they desperately need him for television, and he's on the verge of being cut, actually not even making it on television, depending on, I guess, how he does in this round. And that could be disastrous for ESPN. I know everybody loves this other guy who's like 250 pounds and slamming the ball, but they still would rather watch Tiger Woods. Yeah, he's like a 250-pound linebacker-looking guy, and he has the longest drives right now. And
this was John Daly?
At first, I thought Daly, and then you said linebacker size.
This is a guy that –
if you're going to say Daly, that's lineman size.
Yes, he's much in the mold of John Daly, and golf fans have caught on to him. But, yeah, I think it could be disastrous if Tiger Woods doesn't make the cut at all.
He played pretty well yesterday. Did he just have a poor morning? Or
yeah, something happened where they said it just wasn't good enough. And even though he did good enough yesterday, he must have had a round this morning that wasn't. Let's see. It doesn't say right now. Nobody's going to say he's out of it until he is. So who knows?
Ready?
Yeah, there's.
Well, go ahead, Kev.
He's 3 over. Kev, right now he's 3 over, so that's a problem.
Yeah, I see. Okay, yeah. Yeah, there's no sport quite dependent upon one player the way that golf is. It is incredible because when he's on and playing well, it's fun to watch, and when he's not, the ratings just plummet.
Wasn't it just kind of like Gretzky was in the day? Basically the guy.
Yeah, I think it's even.
I think it's more.
Yeah,
Forget me if I'm wrong, but before Tiger Woods, golf was still very successful on television, right? I mean, it really was.
Agree. Not like that.
Not like that. I think he is and I think players even know that. I mean, you'd hear a lot of the veterans that understand that. I mean, they get irritated that everyone wants to. Like, I watched it yesterday, and we got Tiger Woods every hole.
Yeah.
So, and we should. I mean, everybody's interested in Tiger Woods,
and positively and negatively, they'll watch to root for him to win, and then there's a sizable portion that includes me that roots to make sure that he doesn't win. I'm not a fan.
Is that the thing? I'm curious about that because that's interesting to me. Like, when he first came on, I would never watch golf. I would compare watching golf to like the worst possible thing I could watch on television.
Mm-hmm. Not like baseball for you then.
No. And we're not. We're into like Days of Our Lives realms.
Oh, okay.
We're not into. We're out of the.
I interviewed someone from Days of Our Lives the other day. I'll shoot you the interview.
I'm sure he or she. She's a brilliant person. But the idea here is that to me, that is so boring. But yet I watched golf with Tiger Woods because of his greatness, because he was because of his ability to come back, because he made golf exciting, because he reacted to certain things. But now that he doesn't do that, are people really just watching because of his polarization, or?
No, I'm a fan of. First of all, I like Phil Mickelson, and when it comes down to Tiger versus the field, I root for the field.
I don't like Tiger.
So Mike continues his trend of
I was going to say
people.
I had no knowledge of Mike's interest in golf or knowledge, but I would have bet any money that he hated Tiger Woods.
Mike, if you were in Israel during Jesus' time, you would have been the guy been like, no, that guy's wrong. Everything's wrong.
I remember the Pontius Pilate fan club.
You would have been all over that. You would have been like, because everybody's following him around.
Oh, Herod, go!
Ever since I heard you just talk about Wayne Gretzky, I've never heard anybody.
He's a hard person to hate.
Vitriol.
He really is.
It's a really hard guy to hate.
I mean, if you're in Pittsburgh and you were a Mario guy, I really see that. But you don't have that bias.
See, the problem is, I had no problem with Mario. I respect. I liked Mario as a player. I just didn't like the.
I've never seen Mario was better than Wayne. People didn't dislike Gretzky. Even if you're in Pittsburgh and you think Mario's better than Wayne, you still don't. Gretzky doesn't give anything to dislike about him.
There's nothing.
No,
and I grew up a Flyers fan. He stole 2 Stanley Cups from
Stanley Cups, right?
As a young Flyer fan, I have every reason to hate Gretzky. I didn't then, and I don't now.
No, and you want to. I mean, it's even hard. I mean, if Flyers fans hate Crosby, it's even hard to hate Crosby. I think. I think
it is.
Mike, I have a scarred psyche.
But Mike, you do pet puppies, though, right? I've never seen it, but.
I'm surprised you like Coca-Cola as much as you did, Mike, because that's anything that's the number one thing.
Yeah.
How did you feel about Michael Jordan and LeBron?
I love Michael Jordan.
Interesting.
LeBron too, then?
No, I don't like LeBron.
He does not like LeBron.
I don't like LeBron.
Why, Mike?
We're back on track.
Guys, post your questions for Mike's psychological analysis on Twitter. At Eklund, just put them up there at Eklund, and I will ask you to try to get deep inside the head that is Mike Augello. Beyond the gray shirt to be the documentary.
Black today, black.
Black. Okay. All right. Let's start. Should we?
Yes,
It's the 17th, right?
that's correct.
You tell
All
us.
right. It's Friday.
You're the host.
God, what a week. It's been a long ass week. All right, here we go. Hello, Hockey World. It is Friday. The only reason I know that's because Kevin's here. It is Friday, July 17th, 2020.
I'm Michael Agello, and I am not responsible for the bad construction of the arena in Edmonton.
I'm Anthony Majoni with a lot less agita than Michael Agello.
Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
Kevin Allen.
And that is Jan, not pictured.
I'm
Jan.
Jan.
You're watching HockeyBuzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. This is the podcast that comes to you every Monday through Friday. It's not a hatred for Mike, Nathan. He's in the chat room. It's not a hatred for Mike. It's not a hatred for Mike. It's a fascination.
Yes.
Morbid curiosity.
I was a psych minor. I was a journalism major, but a psych minor. So to me, I'm trying to figure out the exact, the most popular things of all time are what Mike seems to take his aim at. But yet, the ironic thing about Mike is he's a Yankees fan, which just is baffling to me, beyond, because that's the most popular baseball people of all time.
That doesn't fit. You should hate the Yankees.
Yeah, well, no. Okay, I'll be brief. Basketball, I'm a Celtics fan. Hockey, I'm a Leafs fan. And okay, you can say they haven't won a cup since '67, but they had won the second most in the history of the NHL. Baseball, I'm a Yankees fan. Football, okay, there's the exception. I'm a Bills fan. They haven't won anything since the AFL. So there you go.
Bills fan and Leaf fans are they're not really the exception. You can actually draw strong parallels to each of them. But yeah.
But were you a Buffalo Braves fan?
No, I was a Celtic fan.
See, you had a hometown team and you didn't even like them.
Were you ever a Sabres fan, Mike? Was there a moment when you were a Sabres fan and then you're like, no?
Yes, when I was young and stupid.
Well, of course. I mean, you grew up in the town. You're going to be a Sabres fan. But what was the moment? What was the defining moment that changed? Was it like when the bat was knocked down in the arena?
No. I when I was a kid, I was a Leaf fan and a Sabre fan. I liked Gilbert Perreault. No, the downfall of my Sabres fandom was Scotty Bowman coming and destroying the Sabres in the early 80s. When he came in and he tore apart the French Connection, and he made one Stanley Cup semifinal, and then started to disassemble the older team and bring in his players like Housley and Andrechuk, and they never had the success. And the only place that Scotty Bowman never won was in Buffalo. So your fault, Scotty.
Do you hate Scotty too?
No, I don't hate him.
Scotty.
He's a nice guy. I've met him.
But he doesn't like Buffalo with Scotty.
No, I had to make a choice at a certain age, and I went with the Leafs and left the Sabres behind.
Was this like a multiple get out a number two test type, get a number two pencil type thing you had to do? Like you had to Sabres or Leafs,
Can we move on to the show? Can we talk
let's get on.
It's turning into Michael on the couch.
This will be an auxiliary podcast, Mike. I apologize. We'll do another podcast.
There you go.
Behind the gray. All right, here we go. I want to start today with a question to Kevin because yesterday I got a lot of heat and online, on Twitter, in my emails, just blowing up about my opinion. And all of you guys, of course, just laughed and mocked me as well. And I'm not going to say that Kevin won't do the same because it's possible. But I have a feeling you might at least understand what I'm saying. And that is that I felt that the three nominees for the award that we call the Lady Bing are all not playing their game if they are Lady Bing candidates. And that's my theory on the Lady Bing. And so we have that they are not doing enough for themselves. Like they are not driving to the net enough. They are not getting into the corners enough. They're not making themselves a feared presence on the ice enough. In Nathan McKinnon, Austin Matthews, and Ryan O'Reilly, by taking so few penalties, they're leaving something out there that they shouldn't be. That's my theory, Kevin. Your thoughts?
I just don't think they're connected.
Okay.
No, it does bother me, even though I'm guilty of it as well, that we look at that award strictly on the basis of penalty minutes, because it really should just be your behavior in general of, good sportsmanship and all that kind of stuff. But we tend to say, okay, who had less than 10 penalty minutes? And I know guys that do that. They go through the final statistics at the end and just look for the guys with the low penalty minute totals and then set them aside and then pick from that group. Right. But I don't think just because you don't have a lot of penalty minutes, you're not playing an aggressive game. Like Nick Lidstrom, I thought should have won the Lady Bing multiple times.
Yeah.
He always had a low, and I don't think anybody would have ever suggested that Nick Lidstrom left anything in the dressing room, even though he had a low penalty minute total. And, John Beliveau had a lot of penalty minutes early in his career and then ended up with no penalty minutes. And I don't think anybody would have said, boy, Beliveau, when his penalty minutes went down, it was pretty clear he wasn't given all that he has. So I'm not so sure they're connected. I think sometimes you could make that case. I think there are players who you can tell that they're not, they've lost kind of the grittiness because, and you see it with tough guys in the past who had some offensive success, and then all of a sudden their penalty minutes start to fall, and then the first thing the coach says is, you're not playing at the same level. We need that intensity. So I think sometimes there can be a connection to that, but with the guys you mentioned, I don't think like their coaches would say, look, with your low penalty minutes, that tells me you're not involved enough.
But Ken,
we're all fierce. Let me finish one thought, Russ, and then these are fierce competitors. These three guys, all three of them. There's no question that the competitive nature in all three of them is up there, right? They are not, and I don't see any of them being thrilled about winning this award. Like I think to them, the way each of them is like, well, yeah, I know I don't take a lot of penalty minutes, I get a lot of points, but and I also want to say, like, my wife who follows hockey as much as she have to, being in this house for a while, but she's like, why is it called the Lady Award? And it's like, and I know, honestly, of course, I know the history of Lady Bing and all that, but it is kind of odd still. And I do think that from an external point of view, that we're saying the most gentlemanly award or whatever is called the Lady Bing Award. Do you think Kevin, that they would have it? Like, I don't see like them being like, I see them being mocked on the ice. Like I mentioned this, I said, I see like, I could hear somebody yelling, "Oh, Lady Bing candidate, huh?" Like to each of them as they go.
Oh, I think that stuff does happen for sure. And you remember the famous quote by Brown, the Flyers tough guy, who said, "I wouldn't want to win that unless it was called the Man Bing Award."
Right. Which is ridiculous, but
Brown in '88 probably when the comment was made, but
of course it's wrong in every which way. But there's still a lot of people out there.
Kev, I want to really bring you into this conversation because the part that Eck is not telling you is that he said, much like Chris Pronger, he would like to see Austin Matthews get into a fight once in a while.
Yeah, I don't need to see Austin Matthews fight.
Yeah,
and represented by Russ there when he says that. But
and Sheldon Keefe said yesterday in response to Austin being nominated was that he showed incredible self-control because he faces number one checkers constantly. He gets abused at times. He's a big kid, but he doesn't really throw his weight around. Honestly, my only problem with the Lady Bing, and I said this yesterday, is, Kevin, it's turned into the consolation prize for not getting nominated for the Hart. And that's basically what it is. Now, if somebody has 90 or 100 penalty minutes, then they're not going to be nominated for the Lady Bing. But O'Reilly had 12, McKinnon had 10, and Matthews had 8. So it's somebody who scored a ton of points and didn't have a lot of penalty minutes.
Well, the Lady Bing, like I said, we haven't really approached that the right way as a group in a long time. And again, it's way too much emphasis on penalty minutes and not as much about, the way you behave on the ice and the way you conduct yourself and the respect that people had around the league. Like Teemu Selanne is an example of a guy that I think, could have been a candidate for the Lady Bing, even in years when that warrior mentality, the guy that spit out some teeth at the Olympics and then went out and won a big game, like that guy was still a gentleman at all times. He played in a very respectful manner, and that's the way we should be looking at it. But I don't know. I just don't see a connection other than I think occasionally it might happen, but not as a general rule. I wouldn't say it.
It's a great example. Anaheim in 2007-08, Lady Bing, Teemu Selanne had in 2006-07 had 82 penalty minutes. For them. Yeah. But I would never call him a dirty player. But I would say,
to me, if we were looking at this the right way, he could have still been a Lady Byng.
Yeah. And I see, to me, the thing that really bothers me, and no, I didn't say he should fight all the time. I just said,
I didn't say all the time.
No, I said I brought up a Chris Pronger incident where Chris Pronger said, the reason I take suspensions, and he said it's kind of off the record, is that so people have their heads up when they're skating through the zone and know I'm there, and that helps me in the future. And I totally understand. I totally get that. And to me, that creating space for yourself, if you're a guy like Ryan O'Reilly, Nathan McKinnon, look at Sidney Crosby. What Sidney Crosby does, I think, creates space for himself because he definitely will take a few penalties here and there. He will not.
Wait. He still gets the crap beat out of him, so I don't think he's getting
space.
He just deals with it differently. I think, Eck, you're missing the point. Matthews isn't going to carve out more space by acting and retaliating. It's not going to make
I'm talking about retaliations. I'm talking about going in there physically and making your presence known, which sometimes will result in probably a bad call, but a call. And when we sit there and we talk about players, don't tell me in the past that we haven't sat there and said he's got 25 points and he also has 65 penalty minutes. Yep. He's seriously he's a good he's a good player. We brought that up because of that. That's something that we do. We include the penalty minutes in their assessment. The
last thing the Maple Leafs want is for a player who 2 of the last 3 seasons has missed significant time with shoulder injuries is to go in the corner and slam people. He's a skilled player. He's a goal scorer. He's one of their most valuable players. Yeah, Kyle Clifford can throw the elbows. They don't need Austin Matthews to do it.
Well, do you think Matthews going ice and going, let's see, I only have 8 penalty minutes, and if I get 2 more, I'm going to lose the Lady Byng? No, he's playing.
No, I don't at all. But I think that he is. No, I don't think that at all. But I also think that he's. Well, first of all, Austin Matthews is a better defensive player than a lot of people. So maybe he should be if there are situations where a good penalty can be taken, right?
Actually, 2 to 3 years ago, Eck, Crosby did make that joke because against Philly, I think he had 6 penalty minutes, and I think he said, "Yeah, now I'm probably out of the running for the Lady Byng."
He was probably proud to say it. He's probably proud to say it. I hate to say that.
I remember that one.
Yeah, Pavel Datsyuk got on in a fight once, and I believe it was Kenny Daniels said on television, "Well, there goes this Lady Byng." We do tend to tie it up in penalty minutes. But the point I was going to make is, I think you're right. We do celebrate those guys who get penalty minutes. I mean, even when you play fantasy hockey, penalty minutes are a positive, not a negative. You need to get guys that can generate penalty minutes. We see them as a plus. And for certain players, that's certainly true. If you're a guy who your team is counting on playing on the edge and you don't get those minutes, then your coach would say, if suddenly, I'm trying to think of a good example here, if Brad Marchand, ended up with 8 penalty minutes one year, I think they might call him into the office and say,
"You're not playing your game.
You're not playing your game." Yeah,
right. That's what
I think that is true for certain players. But those 3 guys you mentioned, nobody sees ultra aggressiveness as part of their game. They don't need that. In fact, I would say it would be a detriment because they wouldn't want them taking penalties. They don't want them, off the ice. They wouldn't want to see them, get fights or, misconducts and so forth. So I don't know. I don't know that your argument. It's hard to support it.
No, I get it, but I think there's an element to it out there is what I'm trying to get, and I think that does exist, and I think they will be mocked nice. No one else.
I think it used to be that way. Kev, I used the example yesterday because I know about Gilbert Perreault's career in Buffalo because I've lived here all my life. He had maybe 3 fights in his career, and 2 of them were against what you would consider heavyweights. Dan Maloney when he was with Detroit, and Brian Watson when he was with Pittsburgh, and he beat both of them because he was a really, really strong player. But obviously Perreault was a skill guy, and he didn't need to do that, but he did it, and he showed that he could do it. And then he used basically his speed and his maneuverability as his intimidation and his deterrence for the rest of his career. Now, star players don't have to do that. They don't have to drop the gloves just to prove.
But there's all different kinds of penalties, Mike. I'm not just talking about dropping the gloves. There's all different kinds of penalties here. I'm talking about Matthews. We talk about the Toronto being a bad defensive team. And I'm talking about slowing up a guy, which sometimes will result in that guy diving, which sometimes will result in a penalty. But that's a necessary play in the game of hockey to slow him up a little bit. So if if you're not taking any penalty minutes, you're not really playing the game. If you're getting as many minutes as these three guys get, and you're on the ice as often as
there are guys that don't get penalty minutes. Yes, with Valery Nichushkin, with him having 0 penalty minutes, I'll be on your side. But that is a rarity in the sport.
And I don't think that
that's extreme.
That Austin Matthews' inability or lack of willingness to take a penalty is the reason for the Leafs' bad defensive situations. It's other forwards and it's some of their defensemen.
That's it's not helping it.
Everybody knows that.
Eklund, here's what I'll give you, though. I'll give you that it's the least desirable trophy to win. Like, I don't think people get overly excited about winning Lady Byng. Although once Chris Letang, I believe, said that you never want to be nominated for the Masterton because it means you had some serious disease.
He's right.
Really bad happened to you.
You had a bad year.
And, in fact, that's a greater pet peeve of mine than the Lady Byng is the fact that the Masterton should reward veterans for perseverance and being good guys.
We talked about that. We did.
It's the disease of the not that the people who overcome illness aren't deserving, but I wish we again, how could Chris Chelios go his whole career and not win the Masterton for perseverance? Or Nick Lidstrom or any of those guys that lasted 20 some years and were playing great at the end of their year. At the end of their careers. But I don't. No one says my career was incomplete because I never won the Lady Byng, or if I'm listing my greatest accomplishment, I thought it was winning the Byng. Nobody views it.
Should they change the name of this thing too?
Well, I guess so, but I'm not bothered by it just because I like the tradition of the name.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. But
when we were kids, we used to joke about it, laugh.
Oh yeah,
about
of course.
It. The Lady Byng. Who wants to win the Lady Byng?
And hockey players are kids. They're grown up kids, and they're doing that still.
Right. Yeah, for sure. And I think the guys who appreciate it are the guys that never won any awards.
Right.
They get that and they say, well, I got something.
Like when Matthews is nominated for the Hall of Fame, it'll be like, we won't be like, former Lady Byng winner Austin Matthews is here to. No, I mean that's not going to.
It'll be listed.
It's not going to be in his speech, though. I mean, it's not going to be. If he's in the Hall of Fame, he's there. He won Stanley Cups, he won MVPs and stuff like that.
The proudest moment of my NHL career was the year that I won the Lady Byng. I'm
okay,
sure that's going to come out.
Think he'll say that?
Well, I'll tell you what. They could change it. They could change it to the Frank Boucher Award. I mean, he's won it the most, and he was a great all-around player. So if they want to retool it, I'm all for that.
Call it the Jean Rattel Award.
I'll tell you what I thought was
Gentleman John for a reason, right?
Did Yzerman ever win the Lady Byng Award?
I don't know.
Not that I'm aware of.
Because he's like, to me, like he's like a kind of player that probably should have. Like he was completely gentlemanly on the ice, completely like respected around the league. Didn't take cheap penalties at all.
No, he hasn't.
Yeah, but I don't think that he would have won it because there was invariably whenever you'd read stories about the players that officials hate, Yzerman was always at the top. Because he was, that's what I laugh when, people say, well, that Crosby whines for calls and all that kind of nonsense. The two greatest whiners I ever saw in my 35 years of covering the league were Wayne Gretzky and Steve Yzerman. I think those are pretty good players. And I appreciate it, the fact that they always stood up and, tried to get the next call. I mean, that's just part of the game.
What was always told is like they have the most things happening against them because they're always in the position where people have to take them down to make things happen. So,
right.
I mean, just to show you that it's not always about penalty minutes. I mean, Butch Goring won it one year. I mean, he clearly was not the cleanest, nicest hockey player we've ever seen.
In that case, it feels like Mike's
how many penalty minutes he had that year, though.
All right,
Why don't you look it up?
Yeah. We'll move on while we're looking at that. I'm sorry, I apologize. But
we should talk about the Vezina quickly.
I want to talk about the Vezina first, but before we get to that, I want to get to a rumor real fast because I just got this morning and I wrote about it. Over the last couple of days, I've been trying to get the temperature of Vancouver on
He had 2 penalty minutes.
He had 2 penalty minutes that year? All right, well, he must have decided I was going to win the Lady Byng that year. All right, so I've been trying to get take the temperature on Vancouver on this Markstrom situation because it is a fascinating one. And he wasn't nominated for the Vezina today, which is some people thought he could be. And that does help Vancouver probably out a lot that he wasn't nominated.
It helps in the pay scale.
Yeah, exactly. But I was trying to say, are they into him as? I mean, he was the MVP this year, perhaps. Are they? But they also have a guy named Thatcher Demko coming up, right? Who is a serious prospect, right, Russ? I mean, he's 24.
Oh, yeah, no, he's an excellent prospect.
He's a 24-year-old goalie. He's not young anymore.
He's one of the best backups in the league right now.
Right, already. And will be the kind of goalie that does deserve a starting spot in the NHL at some point, I would think.
Mm-hmm.
And yet there they are sitting with Markstrom, who's had a great year and a contract year and a shortened year and all this stuff. And what are they going to do? Like, how are they going to handle this? Like, if they give Markstrom 6 years or 5 years, what happens to Demko? And I finally talked to somebody who said that he thought there was about a 10% chance that they would both be back in December, meaning that one of them or the other would be gone, like Markstrom or Demko. And I went around trying to find teams that would be interested, and a couple of teams I thought would be interested weren't. And then there was also a definite tendency in this situation. When I talked to the Vancouver guy, he says, "But don't look around in the Western Conference because we probably wouldn't move Demko to the Western Conference if we were to trade him." And I said, "Yeah, that makes sense."
Right.
So the three teams in the East that are kind of obvious. I mean, they were, this is not rocket science, but they're Toronto, Detroit, and Buffalo. Three teams that all had interest in Thatcher Demko, 24-year-old guy who can grow with their team over the next several years.
Well, I think
the question I have is, do you sign Markstrom to a 5-year, 6-year deal and trade Demko, or do you let Markstrom walk and keep Demko?
I think you sign Markstrom and you trade Demko, but the clock here is expansion, because if you sign Markstrom, then you're leaving Demko unprotected. So you don't have to trade him at the beginning of the season. You have to trade him before the deadline, and obviously his value will be less because everybody is going to be up against that if they have two goaltenders.
But that's what Mike. It's a great point, because that's why when I brought that up to the Vancouver guy, he said that's why I do believe that it would happen sooner than later. He said because I think we would trade Demko before the UFA period starts to a team, obviously, before they would go out and sign a UFA goalie.
It's a tough thing, though, because if they do that, you're now weakening your goalie tandem just to get an asset for a guy when you still will get assets for him. But again, I think you have to hold on to him and right through the negotiations, because if the negotiations break down with Markstrom, then you're going to lose him. And then you're
not getting either.
Let me just say this, and leads into what Kevin. Buffalo makes a ton of sense because they have Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, who is exempt from the expansion draft and probably needs at least 1 and maybe 2 years in the AHL.
Right.
The other goalies, Hutton's up after this year, and I believe Ullmark is an RFA. So maybe you expose Ullmark if you trade for Demko. Detroit, Kev, their goaltending situation, other than Bernier, is practically barren, so it would make a lot of sense for them.
Yeah, it would. Just a couple of comments. Number one is I think they would trade, if they're going to trade Demko, it would be later rather than sooner, just for the reasons that Russ said.
Yeah.
But the other thing, too, is I have heard from guys who follow what's happening in Vancouver pretty closely, that even though they still view him as a guy that could be their future goalie, they seem unsure whether he's ready now.
Yeah.
They had so much confidence in Markstrom this year, and he really is a primary reason why they had greater success than anyone thought was possible.
Right.
And I think they're a little leery of just handing over the keys to the family vehicle to Demko right now. Yeah. So I think they're going to make every effort to sign him just for that reason. It's not that they're down on Demko. They thought he would be farther ahead than I think he is.
Somebody said in the chat room he didn't play well. He was 13-10. He had a 9.05. It's not his best year. I'll back out, but the defense was awful.
Yeah, and I mean, but this is not an enviable spot to be in. For Vancouver in some ways. In some ways, you're like, oh, you got two great options here, both either to work, right? But
they're in the same spot that Pittsburgh's in. We've been talking about that for a while.
Well, to a degree, but Murray is way more proven than Markstrom. Okay, so I mean, Markstrom had a good year this year, but Murray's won Stanley Cups. That's to me,
right. But what I'm talking about, Ek, is you've got two RFA goalies right now. You're gonna have to make a decision. One, either sign Jari and trade Murray, or re-sign Murray and trade Jari, because you're gonna lose one of them.
True.
And and that's the thing. This market is not only flooded with 3 or 4 quality UFA free agent goaltenders. it's flooded with the fact that other teams are going to have to dump or trade these second goaltenders that they're potentially going to lose to Seattle for nothing, and that's a big factor for these teams.
I mean,
the same thing that happened with Vegas, right? And we saw certain goalies we thought would move didn't actually end up going places because they ended up getting their number one in Fleury. Seattle may identify who they want, and it could be Murray potentially if they or somebody of that ilk, and then the other guy gets basically left holding the bag. So I personally think it's going to be Jarry over Murray in Pittsburgh. But I think a lot of it's going to depend on what happens this playoffs and who they roll with. But I think we're going to see guys who, similar to Vegas, guys who we expected to move, not end up going, and there'll be guys who are lesser known guys who end up moving because they end up getting some other pick or something else they select from their team rather than going with a netminder.
And Kevin, Jim Rutherford was on Toronto radio a couple days ago, and when he was asked about the goaltending situation, about who Sullivan would start in the playoffs, he says, well, Matt Murray won 2 Stanley Cups, so that doesn't mean we're not going to start Jarry. I mean, he was completely non-committal. So, yeah. I mean,
yeah, he was, but I mean, don't we all feel that you're going to start Murray just for that?
I would think so.
Of course, they're starting Murray.
Yeah, but I would say this: the Red Wings. I completely agree with what Mike said that they don't have anybody that's in that age grouping who they would see as a potential starting goalie up the road. I mean, there are some guys, but they have to really, really exceed expectations that everybody has from now. Yeah. So the 3 goalies that I think they would look at would be, I think Jake Allen would be in the mix. Yeah, I think Jerry would be in the mix as well. Because I think Pittsburgh will keep Murray, and I think Demko. I think they would look at. So
that would make some sense. I mean, now we know Vancouver might be like wavering on Demko a little bit, and some of that. You've also seen teams in this situation, Kev, where they know they might lose a guy, start to like act like, oh, we're not sure he's ready yet, and because we might not be able to keep him. But
we heard this, during the season too. Okay, so I agree with you. I mean, it could be some of that, but
there's a little bit of rationalization that goes on. But at the same time, how does USA Hockey view Demko as far as the future goes? Like he's a San Diego kid. He's
played in their he's played in international games. He just because he's from San Diego, he's been immersed in that system. He played. I did a whole article a couple of years ago.
Yeah,
he's been up the ladder with USA Hockey.
Do they view him as one of their future stars?
I don't know about that, because I don't ever talk to anybody about that. Maybe Kevin has a feel.
Yeah, the guy they really like for the future is, and I'm drawing a complete blank. Russ, help me out.
John Gibson.
I'm sorry,
Gibson.
Well, Gibson for sure, but the guy who was drafted last year,
Spencer Knight.
Oh, Spencer Knight. Yeah,
Spencer Knight is Knight is the anointed one.
Okay.
That everybody
and that's fair. He really is.
But the question is going to be when, given the contract they signed Bobrovsky to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's true. I mean, there's someone they can trade. The one thing about the Red Wings too to keep in mind is they have I think 3 second rounders and multiple third rounders.
Yeah. Right.
So they have the kind of assets that can get you a prospect goalkeeper.
And let me shoot down the Toronto aspect of it, because Toronto, I mean, Anderson's got 1 more year left on the contract. The only way that Toronto would trade for Demko is if it was clear that Anderson was going to go free agent, and that's not the indications right now. They like their backup goaltender in Jack Campbell, and what they might do is to avoid having to protect not two goalies, but losing one in expansion. They may wait until after July 1st to re-sign Anderson, so they only have to protect Campbell. So
okay, but let's talk about that just for a half second. Yeah. So if the Leafs lose in the first round here,
thank you.
What have they really done with Anderson? Like I don't know if they could just sign him out of default. Like
at what point do you give up on Anderson?
Right, but you're not getting better if you go towards Demko.
Why would you?
Nobody's saying nobody's saying it has to be Demko. It could be any one of these guys we're mentioning.
That's why.
It could be bad. It could be better if you're going to Demko. You don't know that.
You're making your goaltending situation even more uncertain by going to a guy who hasn't been a number 1 starter.
No, I agree with that. But if you went with Jarry or someone like that, I mean, there's no, there's no guarantee. I mean, again, if you don't get anywhere this year with Freddie Anderson, do I really want to sign him for another 4 years? I have to really think about that. I'm not sure.
It depends on what his price is.
Oh, I don't know. I think it has to do more. See, I don't even care anymore what his price is. He's not winning me playoff games. At the end of the day, he's not winning enough playoff games.
Do you think that the reason that they're losing playoff games is Freddie Anderson? Because I'll say no freaking way.
I would say there are certain games where he maybe doesn't bring his best. And I think if you go back and look at it, you will agree.
I'll not just say that, but I'll also say that the reason they're not qualifying higher in the regular season is because they can't play Anderson more 2 games in a row ever, which is a crazy.
Most number one goalies don't play back to back.
But some do in certain situations.
When you get later in the when you get potentially later in the season, you're going to see that. But I think for most of the part in the regular season now, back to back, you really rarely see the number one starter going early on. They're very much cognizant of the workload, so those goaltenders they're at their peak and maximized in their performance.
That's true.
I mean, I guess performance by that point.
I guess the question is this. Sorry, the question is this here on that Anderson situation. Then we'll move on from there. But it's like, okay, if you're in Toronto, you've got a good young team. Obviously, a team that's going to mature over the next 5 years. Everything's in place. You're either going to go out and get a proven like Holtby type goalie, and just go for short term, or you're going to go for a goalie that'll grow with you and turn into the star that you want when your team is there. That to me is like that's more like a Demko or maybe a Jari. Although I'd rather have Demko personally.
And let me just say this: since he was traded for by Toronto in 2016, so we're talking about 3 3/4 seasons. Who has started the most games in the NHL as a goaltender? Freddie Anderson. So it's not a wilting flower.
But here's his numbers.
Overplayed.
He's a 304 with a 911 save percentage. Like, that doesn't make me feel great because probably in the playoffs, 910 is probably the average.
Right.
So, I mean, he has to give you more. At some point, this guy has to give you more.
But we're getting to that late point of the season. Again, going to Mike's point that, the workload on Anderson is a lot.
Yes, that's a factor.
And Toronto does not really has not. I mean, Mike Yule has tested this. Toronto hasn't really had other options in net in terms of guys that they feel that they could show confidence.
Garrett Sparks.
How short term was that?
But as true as that may be, guess what? He doesn't have that excuse this year.
No,
let's move on.
If he doesn't do it this year, then you basically take that and throw it out the window.
Go ahead, Kevin.
I'm with the Gretzky hater on this one. I don't think Frederik Andersen is the reason why that the Maple Leafs, and I would doubt that the Maple Leafs management sees him as their biggest problem. So.
Oh, I don't think they see him as the biggest problem.
Yeah, he's not the biggest problem. There's no way.
But I do think I don't think he's also part of the solution.
I think you can win with Frederik Andersen. I just think you got to put a proper defensive team in there, and it's not just the defense too. You got to get everybody playing on the same. I mean, it's the same thing. Ed Belfour couldn't win the big game until he could, and then now he's in the Hall of Fame.
Okay.
That what we heard about Ed Belfour all those years in Chicago.
Yeah, no, that's all true. I agree with that. It's goalies are weird that way for sure. I think he's a good goalie. I don't think he's a great goalie. I think Anderson's really good at certain kinds of saves. Very, very good. Like one of the best in some certain kinds of saves. But then there's other situations where I'm not overly impressed with him. I think that let's move on to the Vezina because we have the Vezina stuff here. We've got 3 goalies now who have been nominated for the Vezina this year. Mike, why don't you give us the 3 from the newsroom? Mike, what are the 3 goalies that have been nominated?
The 3 nominees are Andrei Vasilevsky, Tuukka Rask, and Connor Hellebuyck. And I think this is probably the award with the least amount of suspense because I believe it's clear that Hellebuyck should win. But I'll let everybody else talk about that.
Right. I'll make it easy. I think it's Hellebuyck. He had a horrible defense in front of him, and at least defensively, and he was just unbelievable. His GSAA is off the charts. Like, that's all I need to say.
I mean, I agree with Anderson. I mean, with Hellebuyck, I mean, we talked a little bit about that. We could have argued that he'd almost be a Hart Trophy candidate in certain years based upon how much he carried Winnipeg. So, I mean, to me, that I think it's almost a no-brainer that it's Hellebuyck and then everybody else.
I'll put it this way. I as much as I like Vasilevsky, I actually feel like Ben Bishop probably would have as much of a claim for that third spot as he
Yeah,
would.
I agree with you.
So I think
so
Bishop
too.
probably maybe should be. And this is a person who loves watching Andre Vasilevsky in net.
Yeah.
Rask, I think, has had a phenomenal season, but again, it is shaded with the fact that he has an excellent defensive team in front of him in Boston. So for me, considering the personnel in Winnipeg and what Hellebuck's been able to do, I think it's Hellebuck's trophy to lose.
And Brian Burke used it almost as a pejorative that Rask was pretty much a tandem goalie with Halak, and he thought that sort of undercut his credentials for being a Vezina nominee. I think that's the reality now, is that most of these goalies are going to be 1A, 1B guys where the number one plays 60 to 65%. The backup's got to play. So, I don't think it's like pejorative.
Kevin?
Yeah, I think Vasilevsky is the most desired goalie in the league. Like, I think he's moved as the number one. Everybody looks at him as the guy you'd love to have.
Yeah.
But the award is about what they did for the season, and nobody did more than Hellebuck. You've all said it. They've had no defense whatsoever, and they had a great offense, and Hellebuck kept them in games so their offense could, score enough goals to, make them a credible hockey team. When their defense was as bad as it gets.
Yeah.
When you look who they lost and everything else, and you look at those names and you're going, how are they doing this? And they were doing it because of Hellebuck.
Yeah, no, he's the most valuable goalie in the league this year. Now, whether or not that means Vezina or not is because are we getting to the point? Are we getting to the point where this award is going to take on what every other award takes on in the NHL, which is that the coach award has to be the worst team, the best coach on the worst team, and this award usually didn't follow that trend. This award usually was the best goalie in the NHL.
I think Hellebuck is the best goalie in the NHL this year.
The guy who I thought would have been in the top three if he had stayed healthy was Darcy Kemper, given the numbers he was putting up in Arizona.
I think that's fair.
And how good he was early in the year. But unfortunately, he got hurt, right? So, I guess I'll ask you the question. Who do you then consider the best goalie in the NHL that should be up for the award that isn't up for the award?
Yeah, it's a good question. That isn't up for the award. No, I think I'm with Kevin, the Vasilevsky, and Anthony. Vasilevsky's the best goalie in the NHL right now. I think that's absolutely the case. Marc-Andre Fleury does a lot for his team as well. This year, was hurt a little bit more and stuff like that.
But Vasilevsky was wounded by the first 2 months of the season where Tampa Bay played average. And if Hellebuck had done that, Winnipeg would have been down with Anaheim, San Jose, and LA at the bottom of the West.
Yeah. No, but Eklund, you're right in saying that, with awards, we sometimes add an extra layer to it by looking for the underdog to promote. We always do that. Yeah. And, in this case, it's not the writers, it's the general managers. But, you mentioned Kemper. I think people would have loved to have pushed him in there. Like, if he could have stayed healthy, I think he would have been given a nod just because, the Coyotes, they being able to lift that team up. I think there is something to that. I think it's harder for a goalie on a good team sometimes.
It is
to win the award. Just like, we don't put, necessarily or very often the coach of the team with 121 points.
Right.
We look for the team that the coach, like this year, it's Tortorella. Well, look at his injuries. He had to overcome all those injuries.
Yeah.
And I'm one of those.
You get nominated for that.
Tortorella did a great job. So
yeah. It happens, but it feels like a goalie has to enter another level. Like Marty Brodeur. Marty Brodeur would win this award when he was on a very good defensive team that was very good. But he would still win this award. That's what's so weird about this award. To me, Hellebuck, while he had and no one's disputing how his importance was this year. Just like no one's disputing Markstrom's importance to Vancouver, which is another guy I think should have been maybe thought about in this situation. But if you're going to go on who was the most important goalie to their team this year,
what about Binnington?
Yeah,
right. No, that's a great point. Binnington was really solid this year, and after a year he could have not been solid. After he had that could have been the sophomore slump. He won the Stanley Cup and everything like that, and his team is a Stanley Cup contender or one of the favorites. Yeah, Binnington's a good one. That's a good
Well, did he suffer though because of how great he was in the playoffs the day before?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
because of how good his team
because
was.
of how good St. Louis is. I mean,
And St. Louis had a slight dip at some point in time during the season, which probably took some of the luster away of the numbers that he had.
Yeah. No, you're right, Jan. I agree.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the case. So I mean,
so you can say Carter Hart had the same impact on Philly, right? And he's a guy that you think down the road could very well be a Vezina candidate based upon just how good he was.
No, and at times Georgiev kept the Rangers going. You know, like there were points during the season when he was like the reason that they were still alive. I mean, they might. But the year you talk about as goalie for the playoffs, and yet without Georgiev, the Rangers aren't in the playoffs, right?
Right, but Cam Talbot did that for the Rangers, and he wasn't going to be a Vezina guy. He just kept their season alive.
Right. Or you know, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of. So to me, like, but when the Vezina should be as it's defined, right? We should go by the definition. It is the best goalie in the NHL, correct? Isn't that the definition? Isn't it pretty clear
for that calendar year?
For this season, the best goalie in the NHL.
Correct. Yeah.
So
it's Connor Hellebuck.
It could be. I mean, it could be. But I'm like saying, if you were gonna, if I made you draft a team right now, and you had Vasilevsky, Hellebuck, Rask,
that's different. Now you're going into a different
territory. Like, you know, Hellebuck
different
every year. But is this a one-off type thing? Is Hellebuck going to be a perennial Vezina?
No,
but you're not measuring perennial career. It's for the calendar year. That is the focus.
No, I know.
I mean, the factor when you're saying if you're starting a team, you're going to draft the best young goalie. I'd take Spencer Knight. I'd take Samsonov.
No, I'll change that, Mike. You're drafting a team that has to win next year. Okay, who is your goalie? Like that's like if you have to win next season, who's the goalie you take? For me, it's Vasilevsky, hands down.
Right,
that's the guy I take. You know, I think, and you know, he's in this, and I think the Lightning in the beginning of the year was not really about. I mean, I didn't watch enough early Lightning to say it wasn't about. I know he wasn't playing great, but I think
he was not playing well.
He was not very good at all the first couple of months of the season, and that could have been a hangover from last year's playoffs also. Yeah. And Mike talked about being overworked, right? The big issue with Vasilevsky in the past has been the concern in terms of the workload, which was something they had to manage. And we talked about managing, like in the NBA, you manage workloads. NHL is the same thing for goalies also. You need to manage workloads to make sure guys have enough rest before they get to the postseason.
I do want to point out 3 years ago, Hellebuck was second in the Vezina when he had 44 wins and a 924. This year, he had 31 wins because that's the team, but he still had a 922. Like he's been doing this for 3 or 4 years now. It's just not going to. No goalie keeps like a 925 every single year of their career.
With a defense
happen anymore.
With a defense whose top pairing was Josh Morrissey and Neil Pionk.
Right.
No, that's a good point. I mean, these are all good points. I'm just curious what this award is.
Yeah. No, I get it.
From a health perspective, right, Russ? You would say in terms of Hellebuck is a horse. I mean, he's been able to handle it, whereas Vaz has had his injuries here and there. So I'm not saying that's necessarily anything where you parse between two of them. You take either of them.
Yeah, even going back
to get them.
Even going back to when Hellebuck was second in the Vezina, he was 13th in the Hart.
Is that the year they carried him? He carried Winnipeg in the playoffs also?
Yeah.
Same season. So,
I mean, when you look at the teams that had the most shots against this year, you know, like you want to see the teams that gave up the most shots, you know, like so that's something, I guess, you know, for a goalie that shows your defense isn't good. You know, and not completely, obviously, because there's high level shots, but Chicago's number 1, Ottawa's number 2, the Rangers are number 3, Detroit's number 4, and all those teams you could say, okay, that makes sense, but the Rangers being number 3, you know, but then Winnipeg's number 5, you know, so, and the Vancouver's number 6, Edmonton's number 7, so you get into those 3 teams, you know, and I've often said, you know, that, you know, there's 2 goalies in Edmonton, so there's not really you can't really go either way, but.
By the way, Kevin's power just went out, so.
Poor guy.
Man, that sucks. Oh, it was great.
What a way to start the weekend.
We should save St. Louis for next month.
Yeah, let's do that for next week for sure. But I think it's I mean, 5th most shots against is definitely damn impressive. You know, especially because of
it's a good conversation. I mean, I think some of the awards do need to be retooled. I do. I felt that for a while.
Yeah. No, there's no question.
And Kevin pointed out exactly why too.
Yeah, I mean, Winnipeg's the 4th best save percentage in the league as well, which is interesting. And like to your point about Arizona, the 3rd best save percentage in the league, which is kind of surprising, you know. And Bishop in Dallas, the 2nd best save percentage in the league.
Yeah, no, Bishop was great this year.
That was my point. I think Bishop Bishop has when I'm looking at the 3 candidates.
Yeah.
And I cannot deny what Rask has done this season.
Yeah, they're the number one.
Again, and Rask, we saw it here in Philadelphia. You know, when Rask is on his game, he's nigh impossible to beat.
Yeah. Yes.
But the third candidate, I think, isn't up as much as I like Vaz. I think Bishop has much of a claim to that spot as he does.
Yeah, it's true. That's true. Actually, the fourth spot was tied. So it goes Boston number one with a save percentage of .921 for a team, which is really high. Dallas number two, .920 for a team. Arizona number three at .919. And then there are four teams at .913. Winnipeg, Chicago, Columbus, and Colorado. So, it shows it's interesting. There's just some good goalies going on there, and some teams that, like Chicago's goaltending, Leonard was good for them. This is the reality, right? I mean,
and Crawford had a good year too.
Crawford had a good year too. Make Chicago really interesting. Chicago, Edmonton, really interesting in that first.
I do want to bring up one thing.
Crawford.
I think you would like this. Hockey Reference is good about equating some players to other players, right? Based on their stats and numbers.
Yeah.
And Mike walked away, but he'll hopefully hear this. With Freddie Anderson, 3 of the 5 guys. Now, Tim Thomas, I throw him away because he's an anomaly. Ed Belfour's better. But Jonas Hiller and Evgeny Nabokov are 2 guys that closely identify with him. And I go back and say, go look at what they did in the playoffs. I think it's easy to get comfortable with a goalie because you're worried about what could be worse than what you have. But then, again, I just contend what you have hasn't gotten you over the hump.
Yeah, and I think that my thing with Anderson has always been that I think he's a really good goalie, but I also think that goalies and teams go together in certain ways. There's certain kinds of goalies that play better in front of certain kinds of teams. And I think Anderson's behind the wrong kind of team in Toronto.
Could be.
That's not the spot for him, which is why he gets tired so much, which is why he does, can't play back-to-back, even though plays more games. He plays more games because they've had nobody else. I mean, that's the reality of the situation, right? Their backup goalies have been horrible. They've had to play him. I mean, in back-to-backs, whatever, they're not playing back-to-backs. Sometimes I question more Toronto's thing about not him, whether he should play on both games of back-to-back, but who they pick him to play in the back-to-back was always kind of astonishing to me.
Yeah.
And because Mike, didn't they have a thing where they would always play the first game of a back-to-back?
Yes.
Not the way. So you're not.
Right, because they figured their odds were better to get 2 points when you had the fresher goalie and the fresher team, and then the backup would basically be cleaning up. That worked when they had McElhaney because McElhaney won the majority of his games when he had a below par backup like Garrett Sparks who couldn't stop a beach ball. Then that's when it hurt them.
But Mike, did you hear 2 of the goalies that Hockey Reference puts in line with Anderson?
No, I didn't.
All right, Jonas Hiller and Evgeny Nabokov. And what my thing is with that is it's very easy to get comfortable with a goalie that is good and you like them than what you worry about that when you don't have them, but you're still not getting where you want to go. That's the problem.
Right. And
those guys didn't.
Right. I mean, Hiller had limited success with Anaheim. He was there at the same time that Anderson was. So they chose Anderson over him.
Yeah. I like this.
And Nabokov was in it forever and never could get far either.
Didn't get San Jose over the hump ever.
No.
Right.
He was a good goalie. Everybody will say it.
He was unbelievable at times, and at other times, he was streaky, very streaky. Kind of reminds of a little bit Bobrovsky and him to me. I think so. I think they're kind of similar, where they both had that incredible side that they could make saves you just would not believe they could possibly make.
Yeah.
But then also give up an easy straight shot from the point. Weird things like that. There was you catch up. Barticus here makes me sad as a Sens fan seeing Leonard and Bishop killing it everywhere, which is true. I can see that from Sens fans' perspective. Very much so.
Yeah, they had Bishop for about 5 seconds.
Yeah, but they could have kept him. They could have kept him. And they didn't. Yeah, so all right, well, good show, guys. Always like talking goalies. And I won't get into that, Mike, Dave, because you've heard me say it so many times, but I'm going to just for a second.
Oh, God.
I have to.
Doubling down for the weekend. Go ahead.
Here's my thing about playing him the first game of every back-to-back, regardless of who you're playing against. And saying, okay, we have a better chance of winning the first game, so we're going to play our better goalie. And then, the concept, it's not just Toronto. It's every team's concept of when to play the backup goalie. It used to be you play the backup goalie against the worst teams. That's what you used to do in the NHL.
Blame Mike Babcock. That was his plan.
That's his change. I mean, everybody does in the NHL now.
Because Jack Campbell has played the first of back-to-backs since he was acquired. So it was only a month before.
Okay, so I think you have to. I don't think it should be. I think it should be based on the, like, to me, give yourself the best chance to win in every situation. And if you're a team that thinks you're a top team, like Toronto is at the point where they should be a top team, they should not be playing their backup against top teams. If the second game is the tougher game.
Babcock's philosophy was let's bank the 2 points that we should get with the first game with a fresher team with our number one goalie, and then we'll roll the dice on the second one. It didn't work out because the backup goaltender usually was terrible, and
once you want you're tired. When you have better goalie behind a tired defense than the other way around.
Right, but then you're making his philosophy was you're making your starter work harder, and there's no guarantee that the rest of the team who is going to be tired in the second of back-to-back is going to be good enough to win the game. So I see the philosophy. I didn't agree with it.
Yeah.
It was unfair sometimes to that backup goaltender. I think Michael Hutchinson got hung out to dry a bunch of times.
Yeah, he did, and that sucks because, I mean, I'm not saying Hutchinson's a great goalie, but my gosh, like, that concept is it's such a bizarre way of doing it, because what happens if you don't get that win in the first of back-to-back games? Then you're coming in now having lost the first game, and your second game you're coming in now with a tired team and your worst goalie. That's fantastic every time. Like, there's no guarantee you're going to bank that game. I mean, that's like ridiculous. And as well, and again, Babcock's not there anymore. So there you have it. All right. There you have it. Thanks, guys. Great fun talk as always. Everybody have a safe weekend. We will be back again on Monday. Remember, without the buzz, it is just hockey.